Hey everyone, happy Monday. Tara Talmadge and our senior analyst Mike Irwin, and it wasn't a pretty weekend for the Arkansas football team. I don't know about you. I did not see Arkansas getting shut out in that game.
Yeah, I didn't either, but I did think they would lose.
Yeah. Well.
But you know, you got to talk about this, and I'm going to make some people mad today with some of the stuff I say. But I just, hey, I have to say what I think. I'm not always right. But
yeah.
That's what this show's about.
And you got to be up front. If not, you wouldn't be getting all the questions, right? All right, so let's get to our first question this week. It is from Mousetown, who wants to know, what in the wide, wide world of sports happened to my Hogs against Georgia? I knew it would be a tough game, but I didn't expect a total butt kicking. I don't think anyone did. Okay,
you know, I think I said here last week, in fact, I know I did, that Arkansas was not at that level. They're not at the Georgia-Alabama level. There's like, if you're walking along, it's like you come to a really wide, deep ditch before you get over to where they are. And I think both of those games, the Ole Miss game with Alabama and Arkansas's game with Georgia, showed that. There's just a difference. And I just felt like there was. Here's part of the problem. And it starts with these preseason rankings, which are based on nothing other than what you did the year before, and okay, you've got this guy coming back or whatever. So right off the bat, Texas was ranked too high.
Yeah.
And Arkansas beat them, so Arkansas jumps into the poll because you beat Texas and they were 15.
It was a big win.
So boom, you're there. You're I think they were 20th maybe. Okay, that's great. Now you've got A&M, and they're really ranked too high because they were 7th. They had no business being 7th. If you watch them like I did, especially in that Colorado game, you could see they have a huge issue at quarterback, which they did. This is a pretty good A&M team. They've got a decent running game. They've got a really good running back. They're good defense. They're a perfect example of a team that doesn't have a quarterback. Sort of like what will happen to Arkansas if KJ Jefferson ever goes down and misses a whole game.
Right.
It totally changes the team. And that's what's been happening to A&M. And we saw that this past weekend. I mean, they're in trouble with this guy. They really couldn't afford to lose their starting quarterback. So you beat them, and all of a sudden you jump up where they were. Not quite. You're 8th, they were 7th. But you don't belong there. Yeah. You just don't. Now, was last week fun? Sure it was. All this heady stuff. And we sit here every week and we talk about Arkansas gets no publicity when within the SEC. That's all the SEC network did was hype Arkansas all week long. It was like, I was freaking out. I was going, this is like an alternate universe. What happened to those people? And it's because they were looking for I think the national media, I think the SEC regional type networks like the SEC network, they're always looking for a feel-good story every year. And there's usually one, and it's a team that's not supposed to be good, but they are, and then they go nuts and they're hyping it. Well, that's what they did. They hyped it, and then the national media, CBS was doing it. There were other outlets doing it. I was reading stuff. Clay Travis, who basically 2 or 3 years ago didn't like Arkansas, was making fun of their fans.
He's a big Arkansas fan.
Now he comes here and eats at Wright's Barbecue, and now he loves Arkansas, and he said he voted him #1 last week. If he did, he's nuts. But he did say that he did that. So all of that's going on, and it's fun, especially for Arkansas fans who sat here through so many disappointing years. This is like, wow, we didn't expect this. But what happens? People start going nuts.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you see in these movies where somebody's in the desert and they haven't had any water for 3 days, and then somebody gives them water and they just want to gulp it all down, and it's supposed to be bad for you. Don't drink too much. Well, this is what happened. Arkansas fans just ate all that up and went nuts and started making wacky predictions. We're going to jump all over Alabama after we beat Georgia, which even if they had beaten Georgia, as long as Alabama won, you weren't jumping them. That was never going to happen, but that was a thing. They were talking about it. Now, guess what happens? Kirby Smart is sitting back enjoying the hell out of all that because he's sitting there going, okay, I'm going to tell my players to pay attention to all this. What have we done? We've been winning all these years. We've established a winning program. We're a legitimate #2, and everybody's acting like we may lose this game. We're not squat, and we're playing at home. So he gets his players fired up, their fans get fired up, and Arkansas walks right into that ambush. And then they compound it by making mistakes from the, now, first of all, Georgia comes out and goes right down the field, and I knew they were in trouble then when you didn't even look like you could stop them on that first drive. That's what surprised me, was the way Arkansas's defense got dominated.
Yeah.
And they did. They got out-physicaled by some of those guys that Sam Pittman recruited to Georgia.
They're huge.
Big monster guys. But then you make it worse. You stick A.J. Green, a freshman, back there, and what does he do? He catches the ball at kickoff on a 1-yard line, decides to run it out. Seriously? Gets back to the 16. Then you get 2 false start penalties. Next thing you know, you're back around the 10-yard line, and you kick it, and they got a short field, and they score again. Then you send Green back out there, and this time he tries to fair catch it, but he drops it.
Yeah.
And now you get it back, but you don't go anywhere, and you got a punt, and they block the punt. So you're down 21-0 before you can blink.
Yeah.
And it's all based on 2 things, them being better than you, and you making a ton of mistakes.
Ton of mistakes, yeah.
And so then what happened at that point was, you know, they got up 24-0, and Arkansas held it there for a while. They were stopping them at least. It looked a little better. But it just steamrolled, and it looked bad, and it was bad. And now the thing you have to worry about is the psychological effect on the players. They talked a good game when it was over, but you honestly have to learn lessons from a game like that, but you can't let it get into your head.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it wasn't bad that you thought, hey, we're pretty good. You need to continue to think that.
Yeah.
You just need to realize you've got to improve in some areas. And plus, you know, you're not playing Georgia when you're playing Ole Miss. It still will be a challenge, but I hope they can bounce back. But that's pretty much what happened. It was just a bunch of things that got together and made it look like it was what, Cinderella with the pumpkin and all that? And you just turned into a pumpkin. Whoa, it's terrible.
But it didn't mean, so when you were talking about the rankings, you just thinking like they were ranked too high too fast?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was based on other people that were ranked too high.
Okay. It's a combination of both.
Texas and A&M were both ranked too high when they beat them, and then that caused them to be ranked too high.
Okay.
And they still may be too high right now. I wouldn't put them at 13th. I'd put them down around 20th, 19th, 18th, somewhere in there, until I see more from them. Well, if they beat Ole Miss, then maybe I'm thinking, okay, they're better than that. But right now, you just don't know.
Yeah, Ole Miss put some good points up on Alabama, so it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. All right, next question. Blood Red Hog says, I can tell how good this team is. A&M lost to, I can't tell how good this team is. A&M lost to Mississippi State. Texas beat TCU. We just got rolled. But Georgia could be the best team in the country. So are we the second best team in the West?
Well, at least temporarily, I think the winner of this game Saturday will probably be considered the second best team in the West. Now, how does Arkansas match up in this game? You just brought up an interesting point, because when I went back and looked at those 2 games, Arkansas got down pretty much, I think it was 24-0, and they stopped the scoring for a while, but they gave up 13 more points after that. They never really did anything offensively to show, hey, we're going to make something happen. Every time it seemed like they got something going, they'd get a penalty, they'd back up, and when you get shut out, that is depressing.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when you're getting that many points scored on you. Now, look at what happened to Ole Miss. They were down, I don't know, 31-0, something like that. They outscored Alabama 21-7 from that point on. So they showed some fight. They showed a spark. They actually stopped them one time on 4th and 1 inside the 10, I think, and got the ball back and went down and scored. They showed some fight, which is what you want in a game like this. The game is out of control. You're going to lose, but don't just run up the white flag. Figure out something. And I just didn't feel, I thought Arkansas's defense bounced back a little bit, but I didn't think they did anything offensively. So that concerns me. Here's the thing about Ole Miss. Their defense is better than it was last year.
Okay.
They're better. Now, you may not think that based on what Alabama did, but I've seen them in other games, and their defense has improved. I still think Arkansas can move the ball on them and score on them, but it won't be like last year. They're better. But the main thing is, this is the best passing quarterback they will have faced. Matt Corral is good. I don't like Ole Miss. I don't like anything about him, but I'm not stupid. I can watch what he does, and that guy is good. And This is the thing that jumps out at me. They've got 2 or 3 receivers that are really good. These guys are tall, they are fast, they've got good hands, they catch the ball, but the thing I've noticed about them so far this year is when you hit them, they don't go down. They can break tackles like running backs. I've seen them do it more than once. So you really got to wrap up. They throw a lot of little short routes across just right behind the linebackers.
Yeah.
Which normally if your safeties come up and make the tackle, then you're just going to get 6 or 8 yards out of that. But they can turn those into 25 or 30 yards because they can break a tackle there. So it's going to be a real challenge. We've said before, we're not sure about Arkansas's pass defense because even against Georgia, when Georgia wanted to throw the ball, it looked like to me they were doing it. But they didn't throw it much because they didn't have to.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen in this game when you're going up against somebody that's their deal?
Yeah.
So Arkansas is nationally ranked in pass defense, but I think a lot of that is nobody's been throwing the ball on them much.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's going to change this week. So real challenge.
It's a different team than the one that Arkansas got all those picks off of last year, that's for
absolutely.
sure. All right, Lanny wants to know, what do you make of all the penalties so far this season? That's a really good question.
Oh man, there's all kinds of penalties. Now look, I'm going to give them a pass on some of those false starts early in the game because it was so, and you were there.
It was really loud.
But the announcers kept talking about it's just you can't hear.
Yeah.
And Kirby Smart said after the game, our fans were a major factor early in that game by being so loud that they couldn't hear the snap count. So I'm gonna give some of the O-linemen a pass on that. But that's been a problem in other games. So you've got false start penalties. We go back to the beginning when we had targeting. Well, now they've backed off of that a little bit, but we've had pass interference. We've had ineligible receivers downfield. We've had holding.
Yeah.
So Sam Pittman gets asked about all that. And you know what he says? He goes, hell, I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't do those things.
Best response that I think he's given all year.
Don't do those things. Don't hold,
Yeah.
you know. What he was saying to me is, we've talked about this to these guys, but we can't get out on the field and stop them from doing it. You just say, don't do it, and then they do it, and then what do you do as their coach?
Yeah.
So he was pretty frustrated about the penalties.
Understandably.
And I just don't know. It is probably one of the biggest issues with this team is they're one of the most penalized teams in the SEC.
It's just crazy.
And they've been able to get away with it until last Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, did you hear the Grant Morgan soundbite about so there was the one play where Arkansas was called for 3 different penalties, and he went up to the ref and he said, was kind of arguing with him about one of them, and the ref was like, you know what, man, I actually could have thrown one more flag. So that's how bad that was.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can learn from that. All right, Rob's 4516 says, do you see an obvious area that needs Coach Pittman's attention going forward? The one thing that stands out to me is that they will be losing a lot of experienced players after this season.
Well, penalties, we've mentioned that. That's definitely something they need to work on. Special teams is still a problem. They're now, I think it's 4 block punts in. How many games have they played? 10 last year and 5 this year, right?
Yeah.
So that's 15 games. If my division is pretty good, that's slightly over a block punt every 4 games, which is not acceptable. Good. So they got to get that worked out. I don't know what's going on there. I felt like there was a special teams mistake in not basically telling A.J. Green, look, don't go out there and try to run the ball out from the 1-yard line. The coverage, these guys are too good. You're not going anywhere if you do that. So don't do that. And you paid the price for that. So special teams still is something you need to look at moving forward. Tara, I don't know what you do about this. I don't like the backup quarterback situation. If at any point over the next 2 years, you end up with Jefferson out, what is Malik Hornsby going to do? Maybe we're selling him short. I don't know. But
I mean, he made a couple of good passes, I will say, at the end of that Georgia game. There's the one that could have been an almost touchdown at the end of it. But he's just not up to par with what Jefferson can do for sure.
Yeah, I just don't know if, and it might not be this year, but maybe if Jefferson leaves after next year, they go get a grad transfer quarterback again. I don't know. Maybe one of these other guys have progressed by then. But I just don't like the backup situation at quarterback right now. Tight end, what has happened to Blake Kern? He had such a great year last year. And this year he's dropping passes. Now he did catch a big one in this game the other day against Georgia, but he's kind of vanished. And then what's going on with, what's going on with Henry?
Yeah.
You know, is he still hurt? Is that the issue? Because he's not hardly playing at all. He'll be back next year, and they have signed a couple of really good tight ends, so maybe that situation is being taken care of moving forward. I kind of worry about the secondary a little bit because they haven't been tested yet. And what are they going to do in terms of maybe future recruiting, transfer portal guys or whatever, if it turns out they need to shore that up? And then we know for sure that they're going to lose a ton of experience on the O-line and D-line.
Yeah.
And it looks like to me that's where your transfer portal stuff is going to have to happen again. And it's going to have to be a big deal. Otherwise, you're just bringing guys up that have been backups, and maybe they feel like they have some good backup O-linemen and backup D-linemen, but I think there's a portal or two or three in the offing for that. So those are just some of the areas you look at moving forward, both for this year and for next year.
By the way, do you feel like they jinxed Cam Little? He was doing so well.
Yeah, it could have been just more of the everything's going wrong thing.
Yeah,
You know,
anything that could go wrong
I'm kind of a believer in like bad luck and bad karma and stuff. But my wife thinks I'm nuts.
It's bad juju.
It just seemed like there was some wacky thing going on that was just making everything go terrible.
All right, our next question is from ARMON ABBE.
That's Abby.
Abby. ARMON ABBE. Okay, here we go. I thought Kirby Smart and Pittman were supposed to be good friends. Pittman pulled his starting QB early in the fourth quarter, but Smart left his in the whole game, and Georgia even kicked a late field goal in the fourth quarter with its #1 offense still on the field, running up the score even more.
Well, first of all, Pittman pulled Jefferson, he said, because he just wasn't sure if he was 100%.
Yeah.
Then he proceeded to say he didn't see anything wrong with him, and Jefferson said he was okay. But then that gets me thinking, is there something really wrong with this guy? Is this going to affect him next week? But nobody seems to know. He didn't look like there was anything wrong with him.
He talked about it today in his press conference.
Okay.
And
So
Pittman
he's
basically
okay?
said Jefferson is 100%.
Okay.
He's good to go, but he also wanted to get Hornsby in there in that type of environment, even though like
so
half the
explained
fans
it further
had
today,
left.
and I didn't see that press conference, and you did. So that sort of explains why he did that. He didn't just put him in there because he was running up the flag and he expect Kirby Smart to do the same thing.
Yeah.
However, I do think that he makes a good point, which is if these guys are buddies,
Right.
and I'm over there and I've got this game won, which they did, it's now the fourth quarter. If I see the backup quarterback come in, yeah, I'm going to start making wholesale changes. And he didn't do that.
It's
They
surprising.
did go ahead and drive down and get I think it was an actual field goal. And then this was the part that was a little strange. At some point at the 5 or 6 minute mark, you could see that Georgia had put its backup defensive guys
Yes,
in
you
because
could see
Arkansas
that.
started moving the ball just suddenly out of nowhere.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, you got to try to score here. You don't want to get skunked. And they just messed around. They stood around, let the clock run. You see Hornsby just standing there looking, and I'm going, don't waste time. Call the play, get something going. And it almost looked like to me that Sam Pittman just said, look, we lost this game. We're going to get beat. I'm not worried about trying to score, but I know how the fans are. They wanted that touchdown. They wanted it.
To just not get shut out.
It's just odd to me that they didn't really have any sense of urgency once their backup defense was in and you're moving the ball. Why they didn't go for it? Why they didn't try to score there? They were just kind of running the ball and just kind of running plays off and running the clock out.
Yeah. Maybe they didn't want to put like any of their defense back out there too much or give them a chance to get. I don't know.
I'm
trying to come up with some sort of idea.
But I don't think that the only thing I questioned is I did think Kirby Smart should have probably made wholesale changes once he saw Malik Monk come into the game, and he didn't do that for whatever reason.
Bit unnecessary at that point. All right, T.L. Slayton has a kind of similar observation. He says, watching the Alabama-Ole Miss game, it looked like Alabama let off the gas in the fourth quarter, but Georgia played Arkansas like it was a close game right up to the end. Were they mad at Arkansas? Is there some beef that I don't know about?
I think maybe it was what I talked about earlier, this whole business of we're being disrespected. Everywhere we turn, people are talking about Arkansas, not us. And you tell them that all week long, and then they read it on social media and they hear it. And I think their fans were mad too. You could see even in the fourth quarter, you could see Georgia's players just, they'd get a first down and just power forward and be like, all right. And it was like, I'm thinking, why are you doing that? You got this game won. You act like there's some big deal or something. But that indicated to me, they were a little miffed about all this, and they wanted to prove a point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, even the fans, you could see just from me being there, there were a lot of people that were just kind of like, your top 10 matchup, ha ha, So I'm sure the team felt that way.
Yeah, this is what you get for disrespecting us. That's what I saw from it.
All right, SLOBBERSLOB asks, with Art Briles cleared to return to coaching, what are our chances of retaining Kendall? I'm aware that we have Loggins there who could take over, but I'd still hate to see him leave.
There's been some talk that if Arkansas had a really great season, that Kendall Briles is going to get a head coaching job. And that may happen.
Right.
We don't have any idea of that. I don't know that Art going and getting a job means Kendall goes
goes with him.
Because he's done that. That's kind of like a been there, done that thing.
Yeah.
I don't know that that would happen. I do think that it's inevitable that there's going to be a change there. And Pittman referred to that. He mentioned that when he brought Loggins in, it was the idea that he's going to be the coordinator someday.
At some point, yeah.
And once that happens, because I know him, he's probably not going anywhere else. Loggins is a guy that's not going to become a head coach. He's not. He likes it here.
Yeah.
He's like Pittman. He's where he wants to be, and I think Sam likes that idea.
Absolutely.
I think as many coaches as he can have on his staff that just want to be here, he's going to have it.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to replace Kendall Briles sooner or later. I trust, Sam Pittman to make the right decision, which I think it will be, Dow Loggins, and then when other coaches leave. I would be more worried about Barry Odom leaving than Kendall Briles, and yet that's probably going to happen.
Sadly.
And he's going to have to come up with somebody else, but that's what head coaches do, and he hired these guys in the first place. You can't just suddenly assume that he knew what to do in the beginning, but now he's gone goofy and he doesn't know who to hire as a replacement.
There's always going to be some turnover
I think the word is out there in coaching circles. Sam Pittman is a really good head coach to work for. I don't think he'll have any trouble getting assistants because the word is just out there. This is a guy you want to coach under. He's a good boss.
He kind of lets everyone do their own thing, I think, is a big part of it, too. He trusts his coaches to do their job. PORKSODA says, this team had a lot of super seniors come back this year, which I think has played a big part in how well the team has been playing due to having more overall experience. As I understand it, the extra year applies to all players. Are there any seniors this year that you expect to come back next year?
First of all, let's explain that rule, because it basically is a rule that anybody that was on a team last year, that year just doesn't count.
Right, and you get one more.
So if normally you have 5 to play 4 if you redshirt.
Yeah.
But you're only going to get 4 years to play.
Yep.
Well, what this means is you technically could get 5 years to play, because even if you played last year, that doesn't count.
Yep.
All right, so that's going to create a super senior type situation, although I don't know if we're talking super seniors. You may be talking about an extra year, like a 5th year that a guy would normally have 4. But I don't know that always is going to apply, because you've got to throw in scholarship limits. True. In other words, a coach like Sam Pittman, he wanted a bunch of these guys to come back this year because he knew they could contribute, and he wanted to have that experience. I'm not sure the same scenario is going to exist, certainly not at the same level next year. What I was told when I asked about this is there actually may be some seniors this year that could come back next year, but if they really want that extra year, and some may, they may have to go into the portal themselves and go somewhere else, because Arkansas will want to fill their spot with a scholarship.
Yeah.
Or with somebody else from the portal.
Right, another
transfer. In other words, we have plenty of what you do, but we need a D lineman. So if you want to come back, you hit the portal, we'll bring somebody in from the portal and use your slot. But it's way too early to really start talking about this, because they're not going to mention that right now.
Yeah.
As we get to the end of the season, then that's going to become a point of discussion, and we'll be able to talk a lot better about that then.
Yeah, they are going to lose a lot of guys.
They are.
And that's gonna be tough. Sharon Louise asks, why does a loss like this always bring out the morons on Facebook and Twitter? I've read comments like, get rid of the coaching staff, bench Jefferson. Give me a break.
You know, that's always out there. It actually is a very small element of social media.
Yeah.
People get the impression that everybody's doing that. Everybody is not doing that. But there are people that will do that.
I feel like some people do it just to get a rise out
They
of
do.
others.
It's a joke with some people. They just do it to, you know,
just to do it.
just to get people angry.
Yep.
But there are people, here's what happens a lot of times. You get somebody that's all mad because your program is not doing well. And this is true of any, not just Arkansas, but the program's not winning, you're mad, so you just disappear. But then they start winning, well, you pop back up, and now you want to go crazy over it.
Yep.
And you basically, you're playing with somebody else's money. You know, we're going to do this, we're going to do, and then when they don't do what you want, then you're back mad again. This is the extreme that when I get out of this business, that will be the one thing that I like getting away from, is the extreme. Because as a reporter, I've always tried to tell people, it's not about extremes, but yet that's what we do. The media wants to take something and hype it. Fans go right along with that.
Yeah.
It's like what we were talking about earlier with becoming a top 10 team. You want to do that. You want to hype it. People want you to do that. But is that reality? Or do you really want a reporter like me to stand back and go, wait a minute, these guys aren't really a top 10 team. Stop. No, I would get criticized if I did that.
True.
But that's what I've done my whole career. I've tried to have a little balance to what I'm talking about. And I got that, and I'm no fan of Lou Holtz, but I got this from him years ago when he was talking about some situation in which they didn't perform the way, it might have been after a TCU loss or something, but he said, look, I've found that in football, nothing is ever as good as it seems or as bad as it seems. There's a middle ground there. If you can go on the internet and with that mentality, you're going to not have to worry about these people because you just look at them and go, they're going nuts. You're either, because that's what we're talking about, extreme views, extreme positive or extreme negative, rather than what is reality.
Yeah.
I've always been a person, I want somebody to give me reality.
Right.
I don't want some hyped up thing or some, this is the end of the world and we can't win another game. I want to know what reality is.
Yeah.
But I don't think a lot of people want that. I think the media knows that. This is the biggest issue that I have right now with all of the media, especially sports media, but I understand why they're doing it. If you don't hype, what do you end up with? You don't get the clicks. I'm sitting there last night watching the big game, you know.
Yeah, the Patriots Buccaneers.
Yeah, he goes back home, and they just make a whole big deal, and they've got music, and they're doing all this stuff.
That was a big game.
I know, they're hyping it, but I'm just going, okay, let's see what happens here.
Yeah.
I'm not like dying to know. And pretty much what I thought would happen. Actually, I thought Tampa Bay had a harder time winning that game than I thought they would.
I agree.
I thought the Patriots played much better. They almost won the game, probably deserved to at least, you know, win.
Kicking it when it's pouring down rain from 56 yards is pretty difficult.
So I wasn't like really into the hype of it, but that's what we do. We act like this is the biggest thing to ever come along. And what is it really? It's a guy that won a lot of championships at a franchise, went somewhere else, and now, okay, we're going to show you, but no, I'm going to show you, you really do miss me. So I don't know. I don't get into all that, but I can see where a lot of people do. Yeah. And that is what the world of sports these days is all about, just hype, 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 hype.
At the end of the day.
This is terrible, this is awful, they stink. Look, do you realize what's going on right now? Ed Ogeron and Jimbo Fisher are now being just trashed all over the place. Like these two guys are making a combined $14 million a year and they can't coach. So it's like, okay, let's take these guys and trash them. Yeah. You know, because they're terrible. And then you take other guys and let's make Sam Pittman like he's the next guy. He's going to be the guy, but they would trash him as soon as he has a problem. True. It's just what happens. Yeah.
All right. Tusk wants to know, have you heard any updates on when Texas OU will be joining the league?
I think it's 2025.
2025 is still the day that they have all, or the year that they have all said their contract expires and they can come to the SEC.
Could happen sooner.
I would just really find it hard to believe that that's going to happen in 2025.
That's 4 years.
I'd say
That's a long
2023,
time.
2024 is your best bet. Maybe not 2022, but.
Here's the thing when it happens, whenever it does happen, it's going to change everything.
Oh, yeah.
Believe me. Because the big issue is, do you end up with 4 4-team pods for the 16 teams, or do you end up with 2 8-team divisions? And I figure it's going to be the pod system, and then how is that pod system going to work? There are people that automatically assume that Texas is going to be in Arkansas's pod. I don't think they will be. I still think it's going to be
OU.
I think it's going to be Missouri, OU, Arkansas, and Ole Miss. And then I think it's going to be Texas A&M, Texas, LSU, and Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Because I think they're going to do it regionally.
That would make sense.
But other people disagree with me on that. But I just don't see them having OU and Texas in the same pod with Arkansas. It could happen.
Good.
But I don't think that's what's going to happen. But the problem, here's what happens. Even if they're not in your pod, now in your pod, you're guaranteed to play them every year. But there's so many crossover games under a pod system that you're rotating, and you've got all these crossover games. So there are going to be plenty of years where they do play Texas.
Oh, for sure.
Might be every other year.
You know, Texas OU is this weekend. How many SEC chants do you think there's going to be at that stadium?
Yeah. And then what do they call that now? The Red River what?
Rivalry.
Oh,
the Red River rivalry.
I read that last time. Come on, it's the Red River Shootout.
I know.
Give me a break.
But like in my years, I guess they've started calling it the Red River rivalry.
No,
but I always thought of it as the shootout.
Nobody believes they're going to pull out guns and start shooting somebody. Give me a break. It's fun. Do they think that the battle line rivalry is that we're going to line up in blue uniforms and Confederate uniforms and fight up on the state line at Pea Ridge?
Right.
No one really believes that.
No.
It's just a name. Come on. It's a better name than what they have now. It's wimpy.
I
Red
agree
River
with
rivalry.
you. It's also, try to say that like 5 times fast. It's kind of hard.
It's terrible.
All right. Last question, Mike. Alex4Hogs88 wants to know, what is your favorite memory against Ole Miss? There's so many to choose from, honestly.
Well, it's kind of a no-brainer with that Henry Heave.
Right.
Because I'm up there, I'm on the photo deck. I'm actually shooting. Jason Carroll's down there shooting on the field. And I see that pass, and I see who's around Hunter Henry, and I think there's no way. This is the end of the game.
Yeah.
It's over. And I do not expect him to loop that thing back over his head all the way back up to where Brandon Allen is, and Alex Collins happens to be standing there, and he gets and goes to the other side. And then you're watching him, and he goes and he's got a first down. And then the next thing you start asking yourself is, okay, if they score, what happens then? I guess we're going to overtime. So they score, and you think overtime, and then Bielema decides to go for it, and it's dramatic. And then what happens after that? Brandon Allen takes the ball on a quarterback sneak, or he kind of goes around to the side and pushes over, barely makes it in, gets knocked out while he's doing it. How do I know he was knocked out? Because Jason runs up and is standing over him as he's around his teammates, and you can see his eyeballs going nuts. And then he kind of figures out where he is, and they kind of pick him up, but he's still daffy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I come down to the field. You know, what was amazing about that game was how fast everybody left the stadium. It was just empty. And we got ready to go back out to the car, and there's nobody. Now, why is that significant, and why is that worth remembering? Because I'm going to name the schools I don't like in the SEC too.
Is this in order?
In terms of yeah, I think I can remember. In fact, A&M, don't want to go to College Station. I've already talked about that. Don't like Columbia because it's boring and weird and goofy. I don't like their stadium. I don't like anything about what they. I just think they are a Big Ten. They don't belong, but I don't like them. But then there's Ole Miss. Everybody talks about the Grove, and the Grove is cool, and this and this and that. Here's what's wrong with Ole Miss. They have the worst frat boy problem in the SEC.
I think there's a lot of people that would probably agree with you on that.
Frat boys ride around in cars and yell and throw stuff at people and cuss at them. And I know because we've tried to do live shots out there before, and they're looking for, well, I left out Baton Rouge because they're up there too because of the same thing. When you go to Baton Rouge, if you're identifiable as either opposing media or opposing fan, there's still this story the guy told when I was on the radio one year. He goes down there, he's got his hog shirt on, goes into a porta potty, and they turn it over on him while he's inside because they saw that he was an Arkansas fan because of what he was wearing.
That's awful.
Baton Rouge is a terrible place to go to a game. But Ole Miss is that way from a standpoint of the frat boys. They just, and I still remember being out there one time with Drew Ammon and I were out there, and these guys would not, we were afraid we weren't going to be able to go on because every time it looked like we were going on, they just drove up and started cussing and yelling on the air, and you can't go on if you've got somebody doing that, and there were no security anywhere around there. So we're pretty mad about that still. And we go out there, and I'm thinking, frat boys?
Yep.
Where are the frat boys? Where are the cussers? They're nowhere. This is
They
really
were gone.
cool. This is really cool. Let's just go to our car in peace and get in and drive off. And so that was really cool. That's my favorite Ole Miss memory.
And plus, it was a great game.
It was a great game, and there were no frat boy problems after it was over.
Hopefully, that will be the situation this weekend as well.
Yep.
Everyone leaves the field and the stadium early, and everyone can leave in peace. All right, that's going to do it this week for our Ask Mike segment. Everyone, thanks so much for watching.